Welcome to a channel built on science-backed strategies to transform how you train, recover, and perform. Here, we don't just talk about lifting weights, we dive into how the nervous system drives real muscle growth, why hypertrophy and strength require different approaches, and how recovery is the missing stimulus most people ignore. You'll learn how nutrients like creatine, electrolytes, and leucine amplify your training, how hormetic tools like cold, heat, and breathwork can supercharge recovery, and why training smart, not just hard, is the secret to lasting progress. Every episode breaks down complex science into clear, actionable tools you can use today. Whether your goal is building size, gaining strength, or simply staying resilient as you age, this is not guesswork, it's evidence-based performance. If you're ready to unlock your body's potential and train with intention, you've come to the right place. Let's get started. Muscle growth is not just about what happens inside the muscle itself. It starts with the nervous system. Every time you pick up a weight, whether it's light or heavy, your nervous system is the gatekeeper that determines how many of your muscle fibers actually participate in the movement. Think of it this way, you have far more strength and potential muscle fiber recruitment available than you're ever tapping into. The nervous system decides which fibers are recruited based on the intensity, the demand, and the signals you're sending it through your training. This is why two people can lift the same weight and walk away with very different results, because the depth of nervous system engagement determines how much adaptation is triggered. When we talk about adaptation, we're really talking about creating the right kind of stress, mechanical stress, that signals the body to build more muscle. But that stress must be significant enough to make the nervous system recruit higher threshold motor units, the ones that connect to the larger, more powerful muscle fibers. These fibers are the ones with the greatest potential for strength and hypertrophy. Low-level efforts, like lifting weights that feel too easy or staying in a comfortable rep range, don't activate those fibers. The body simply doesn't feel the need to adapt at a meaningful level. This is why progressive overload is such a critical principle. If you're not consistently asking your nervous system to recruit more fibers by increasing the demand, whether that's through more weight, more sets, or increased time under tension, your muscles won't receive the message to grow stronger and larger. It's important to understand that the nervous system doesn't just flip a switch and recruit everything at once. It follows a principle where smaller motor units are recruited first, the ones connected to slower, endurance-oriented muscle fibers. These are efficient and resistant to fatigue, but they don't create much size or strength. As the demand increases, heavier weights, faster speeds, higher levels of force, the nervous system begins to bring in the larger motor units which connect to the fast-twitch fibers. These are the fibers that give you explosive power, strength, and growth potential. But you only access them if you push the nervous system into a zone where it perceives that recruitment as necessary. Without that, those fibers essentially remain dormant, untouched. This is why simply showing up to the gym and moving weights around without intensity isn't enough. The nervous system is constantly calibrating. If the load is light and the effort is easy, the message it receives is that no additional muscle is needed. But when you apply mechanical stress at the right level, something different happens. The nervous system is forced to engage, to recruit more fibers, and that recruitment triggers a cascade of signals inside the muscle cells. Mechanical tension, metabolic stress, microtears, that eventually lead to hypertrophy and strength gains. The nervous system sets the stage, and the muscle follows. Now, here's where intensity becomes critical. Too often, people confuse working longer with working harder, but it's not about spending 2 hours in the gym moving through endless sets. It's about applying focused, progressive effort that challenges the nervous system to expand its recruitment patterns. For example, lifting a weight that feels heavy enough that you can only perform 6 to 8 clean repetitions will force deeper recruitment compared to lifting a weight you can move 20 times without struggle. Both approaches have their place, But if the goal is size and strength, you must deliberately train in ranges where the nervous system is compelled to activate those larger motor units. Progressive overload doesn't always mean piling more plates onto the bar. It can also mean slowing down the eccentric phase of a lift, increasing the total number of sets across a week, or reducing rest time between sets to keep the nervous system under higher demand. What matters is that you're not staying static. If the load or intensity stays the same, the nervous system adapts quickly and stops recruiting new fibers, which means your progress plateaus. The body thrives on novelty and challenge. By creating small, consistent increases in demand, you ensure the nervous system keeps reaching for those high-threshold fibers, keeping growth and strength gains alive. Recovery is a part of this process as well. The nervous system doesn't just recruit fibers during training, it also determines how well those fibers are able to recover and adapt afterward. Overload without recovery leads to a fatigued nervous system, and when that happens, you actually lose access to higher motor units during your next training session. This is why smart programming, knowing when to push and when to pull back, is so essential. You want to strike the balance where each session signals adaptation without pushing the nervous system into exhaustion. So the foundation of building muscle isn't just mechanical, it's neural. Training with the right intensity, applying progressive overload, and respecting recovery cycles ensures your nervous system keeps opening the door to more muscle fiber recruitment. That's where real adaptation lies, and that's the difference between spinning your wheels and making measurable progress. When people talk about building muscle, they often lump everything together, lifting weights, getting stronger, and growing bigger. But the reality is that hypertrophy and strength training, while related, are driven by very different stimuli and create very different outcomes. Understanding this distinction is essential if you want to train with purpose and actually reach the goals you set for yourself. Too many people walk into the gym and follow a routine without clarity, and as a result, they get neither maximal size nor maximal strength. To avoid that, you need to know how to align your training protocol with the adaptation you're actually seeking. Let's start with hypertrophy, muscle growth. The primary driver here is mechanical tension combined with metabolic stress and micro damage to the muscle fibers. But the nervous system will only stimulate this growth if the training volume and time under tension are sufficient. That's why hypertrophy protocols usually involve moderate weights, not the heaviest you can possibly lift, but heavy enough to challenge you within the range of about 8 to 12 repetitions per set. The idea is to keep the muscle under tension long enough to signal growth, while also applying enough stress to recruit a meaningful number of fibers. Training at this rep range with multiple sets, combined with relatively short rest periods, builds the environment where muscle fibers swell, protein synthesis is triggered, and growth occurs over time. Now compare that to strength training. Here the primary adaptation isn't about increasing muscle size, but about teaching the nervous system to recruit more motor units more efficiently. In other words, you may not get much bigger, but you'll get a lot better at using the muscle you already have. Strength protocols emphasize much heavier loads, typically 85 to 95% of your 1 rep max per, formed for fewer reps, often in the range of 1 to 5. The rest periods are much longer, 2 to 5 minutes, because the goal is full recovery between sets to allow for maximal output on the next lift. This kind of training is less about metabolic stress and more about neural efficiency, teaching your body to synchronize recruitment, increase firing rates, and maximize force production. This difference in training focus explains why you'll often see powerlifters who are incredibly strong but not necessarily as large as bodybuilders, and bodybuilders who are significantly bigger but can't always match the raw lifting numbers of a strength athlete. Both are training hard, but the stimuli they're applying to their systems are distinct, and so are the adaptations. Neither approach is better. It depends entirely on your personal goal. If you want to add size, you need hypertrophy protocols. If you want to increase force production, you need strength protocols. Of course, there's overlap. You cannot build muscle without gaining some degree of strength, and you cannot gain strength without adding at least some muscle. But the emphasis matters. If you spend most of your time working in hypertrophy ranges with moderate weight and high volume, the nervous system adapts differently than if you spend most of your time lifting near maximal loads for low reps. It's the difference between asking your body to grow new muscle fibers versus asking your body to maximize the firing potential of the fibers it already has. Time under tension is also worth highlighting here. For hypertrophy, it's not just about moving the weight from point A to point B. How long the muscle is under load matters. Slowing down the eccentric, controlling the movement, keeping constant tension across the set. These are the tools that stretch out the signal for growth. With strength training, time under tension is less important. The priority is moving maximal loads with perfect form and maximal neural drive. You want crisp, explosive contractions and enough rest to repeat that effort again and again without fatigue compromising your form. Rest is another key differentiator. In hypertrophy training, shorter rest intervals, anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds, keep the metabolic stress high, maintaining the signal for muscle growth. But in strength training, short rests actually interfere with the outcome. If you haven't fully replenished ATP and cleared fatigue, you can't hit maximal outputs in your next set and strength gains plateau. So the longer rest periods are not wasted time. They're part of the design to ensure each lift is performed at peak intensity. Nutrition and recovery also tie into this distinction. Hypertrophy requires sufficient protein intake, particularly leucine, rich sources, to maximize muscle protein synthesis. Carbohydrates matter too, because glycogen replenishment is crucial when training at high volumes. Strength training, while still benefiting from protein and carbs, places a slightly greater emphasis on nervous system recovery. Sleep, electrolyte balance, and adequate rest between sessions become even more important when your training is centered on heavy neural demand. What often happens is people mix these two approaches without intention. They might spend part of a session doing heavy singles or doubles, then shift into high-volume hypertrophy work, not realizing they're sending mixed signals to the body. It's not that you can't combine the two. It can be incredibly effective when periodized properly, but if your goal is primarily size, your sessions should lean into hypertrophy protocols. If your goal is raw strength, your sessions should lean into heavy, low-rep, long rest protocols. Clarity in your goal creates clarity in your training design. The takeaway is simple. The body adapts specifically to the stimulus it's given. If you want to build muscle size, you must emphasize moderate loads, higher volume, and sustained time under tension. If you want to build strength, you must emphasize heavier loads, fewer reps, and longer recovery periods. Trying to chase both at once without structure usually means you end up falling short on both. So align your training with the outcome you're after, apply the right stimulus consistently, and the results will follow. One of the most misunderstood aspects of training is the role of recovery. Most people think progress happens inside the gym, under the barbell, or during that last rep of a hard set. But the reality is, that's just the signal. The actual adaptation, the increase in muscle size, the gains in strength, the improvements in performance, happens after the workout when your body is repairing and rebuilding. In fact, you could argue that recovery is the missing stimulus for many people. They train hard, they push their muscles and nervous system, but they don't allow enough time or the right kind of conditions for the body to adapt to the stress. Without that, you're just accumulating fatigue, not building capacity. Think about what happens during a training session. The nervous system recruits fibers, the muscle fibers sustain microtears, energy systems are depleted, and stress hormones like cortisol rise to help you manage the effort. That's the breakdown phase. It's necessary, but it's not the end goal. The end goal is the compensation phase that follows, when your body senses the stress, recognizes the damage, and responds by making the system stronger, more resilient, and better prepared for the next load. But here's the catch: that only happens if you give your body the proper environment to repair. Otherwise, you stay in breakdown mode. Sleep is the foundation of that environment. During deep sleep, growth hormone peaks, protein synthesis is elevated, and the nervous system recalibrates. This is when muscle repair actually takes place. If you're short on sleep or your sleep quality is poor, you cut off that adaptation window. You might still train hard, but your body won't respond the way you want. A simple way to think about it is this: training provides the question, but recovery provides the answer. Without sufficient sleep, the body never fully answers the question you asked it in the gym. There are also more objective tools we can use to assess whether recovery is actually happening. Heart rate variability, or HRV, is one of the best indicators. HRV measures the small fluctuations in time between your heartbeats, and those fluctuations are directly tied to the balance between your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight system, and your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system. When HRV is high, it suggests your body is recovered and resilient, ready to take on another challenge. When HRV is low, it usually indicates stress, fatigue, or incomplete recovery. Checking HRV daily gives you a snapshot of whether your nervous system is primed for performance or whether it's signaling for rest. Grip strength is another surprisingly powerful indicator. Grip strength is closely linked to overall neural output. If your grip feels unusually weak one day, even if you haven't specifically trained your forearms, it can be a red flag that your nervous system is fatigued. Athletes and coaches often use a simple grip dynamometer, or even just a consistent test like holding a barbell for time, to see whether grip performance matches baseline. If it's down, the nervous system may need more recovery before pushing into another demanding session. Breathwork and CO tolerance testing also provide insight. When your ability to tolerate CO drops, it often signals that your stress levels are high and recovery hasn't been sufficient. These are subtle tools, but they add up to a clearer picture. Your body leaves breadcrumbs about whether it's adapting or just hanging on. The more tuned in you are to those signs, the more intelligently you can train. Now, many people ignore these markers and instead rely on motivation or habit to dictate their training schedule. They assume more is always better, but the paradox is that training without recovery is actually counterproductive. You don't get stronger, you just get worn down. Over time, that leads to plateaus, nagging injuries, or in some cases, regression. The nervous system can only handle so much before it starts protecting itself by limiting recruitment and dampening output. That's the opposite of adaptation. The good news is that recovery is something you can actively train, just like strength or hypertrophy. Prioritizing sleep, managing stress through deliberate practices like breathwork, and fueling properly with protein, electrolytes, and hydration all accelerate the recovery process. Active recovery sessions, low-intensity movement, mobility work, or even light cardio help circulate nutrients and speed repair without adding additional stress. Recovery isn't about doing nothing. It's about creating the right inputs so the system can bounce back stronger. So if you're chasing muscle growth, strength, or performance, remember that training is only half the equation. The missing stimulus for many people isn't another set, another rep, or another day in the gym. It's better sleep, smarter monitoring, and deliberate recovery. That's what allows the body to take the stress you applied and convert it into lasting adaptation. When we think about improving performance and building muscle, most of the focus goes to the training itself, the sets, the reps, the intensity, but nutrients can act as powerful amplifiers, taking the signals you create in training and ensuring they result in actual adaptation. It's not that nutrients replace training, they don't, but they make the difference between a signal that gets fully expressed and one that falls flat. 3 in particular, creatine, electrolytes, and amino acids like leucine, stand out because of their direct effects on strength, protein synthesis, and recovery. Let's start with creatine. This is one of the most well-researched and effective supplements we have in the realm of strength and hypertrophy. The way it works is elegant. Inside your muscles, energy is produced through molecules called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Every time a muscle contracts, ATP is broken down for energy, and the byproduct is ADP, adenosine diphosphate. Creatine serves as a rapid donor of phosphate groups to recycle ADP back into ATP. This means during short, high-intensity efforts, heavy lifts, sprints, explosive movements, you can sustain output longer before fatigue sets in. Over time, that additional output translates into greater training volume, heavier loads, and ultimately more strength and muscle. Taking creatine daily saturates the muscles with phosphocreatine, so it's not about when you take it in relation to training but about consistency. A few grams every day ensures your system always has that extra reserve available. Now, electrolytes. These often get less attention, but they're just as critical, especially for maintaining performance across a training session. Electrolytes, sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, are the charged particles that allow nerves to fire and muscles to contract. Without proper electrolyte balance, the electrical signals between your nervous system and your muscles don't transmit efficiently. That's when you experience cramps, fatigue, or a general sense that your output is flat. What's interesting is that sodium in particular is often underconsumed relative to training demands, especially if you sweat heavily. Replenishing electrolytes before and during training doesn't just prevent cramping. It maintains neural drive, keeps blood volume stable, and allows you to sustain force across multiple sets. Even a small drop in hydration or electrolyte balance can reduce performance significantly, and that compounds over weeks and months of training. Then there's leucine, a branched-chain amino acid that plays a unique role in muscle growth. While all amino acids contribute to protein synthesis, leucine acts almost like a switch. It triggers a pathway inside the muscle cell called mTOR, which is the key driver of protein synthesis. In other words, consuming enough leucine after training ensures that the stimulus you created with mechanical tension is actually converted into muscle repair and growth. This is why post-training protein is emphasized so often. It's not just about total protein intake throughout the day. It's about making sure that in the window after you've trained, when the muscle is most sensitive, you're providing enough leucine to flip that switch and maximize the response. Whey protein is particularly effective here because it has a high leucine content and is rapidly digested, making it ideal for post-training recovery. What ties all of these together is timing. Creatine works on a saturation model, so the key is daily use, not whether you take it pre- or post-workout. Electrolytes, on the other hand, are most effective when consumed before and during training, because that's when your system is under the highest demand for fluid balance and nerve signaling. And leucine-rich protein sources are best consumed in the immediate post-training period when your muscles are primed to repair. So while each nutrient works through a different mechanism, aligning their intake with your body's natural rhythms of effort and recovery maximizes their impact. It's also worth pointing out that these nutrients don't just enhance muscle growth or strength in isolation, they improve recovery speed. Creatine helps reduce markers of muscle damage and inflammation. Electrolytes ensure your cardiovascular and nervous systems bounce back more quickly after training stress. Leucine accelerates protein synthesis so that repair is initiated sooner. Faster recovery doesn't just mean feeling less sore, it means being able to train with higher quality and consistency across the week. And consistency, more than any single workout, is what produces long-term gains. What often happens is people focus on the complexity of training programs, switching routines, adding sets, chasing new methods, while overlooking these simple, proven tools that make training more effective. Supplements are not magic, but when they directly support the systems that drive strength and hypertrophy, they become amplifiers. They don't create the signal, but they ensure that when you do create the signal, your body is ready to respond at the highest level possible. So the message here is straightforward. Training provides the stress, but nutrients determine how fully you adapt to that stress. By consistently using creatine, managing electrolytes before and during your sessions, and prioritizing leucine, rich protein after training, you can dramatically enhance your strength output, muscle growth, and recovery speed. When we think about recovery, we usually focus on sleep, nutrition, and rest. Those are absolutely essential, but there's another layer that can either accelerate or interfere with the process depending on how it's applied. That layer is hormesis. Hormesis is the idea that small, deliberate doses of stress can actually make the body stronger, more resilient, and better adapted to future challenges. It's not about eliminating stress entirely, it's about applying it in the right way at the right time so that it enhances adaptation rather than disrupting it. Cold exposure, heat, and deliberate breathwork are all examples of hormetic tools. But their effects are not one size fits all. Timing, context, and your specific training goals determine whether they help you recover or hold you back. Take cold exposure. Ice baths and cold showers are popular because they reduce inflammation, lower perceived soreness, and can make you feel mentally sharper, but the timing is critical. If your primary goal is hypertrophy, building muscle size, jumping into an ice bath immediately after training can actually blunt the very signals that drive growth. That's because part of the hypertrophic response relies on inflammation and the cellular stress that follows training. Cold exposure dampens those signals. It tells the body, in effect, there's no need to adapt, which reduces the muscle building response. On the other hand, if the timing of cold exposure is shifted, several hours after training or on recovery days, it can actually enhance adaptation by speeding up recovery, reducing soreness, and improving your readiness for the next session. So the tool itself isn't good or bad, it's how and when you apply it. Heat exposure works differently. Saunas, hot baths, and other forms of deliberate heat stress don't blunt hypertrophy in the same way cold can. In fact, heat exposure after training may support recovery by improving circulation, boosting heat shock proteins, and even enhancing endurance adaptations. The rise in body temperature can increase blood flow, delivering nutrients more effectively to damaged tissue, and heat shock proteins act like chaperones inside the cell, stabilizing newly formed proteins and helping them fold correctly. Over time, this can improve muscle repair and resilience. Heat exposure also has a strong impact on the cardiovascular system, improving blood vessel function and supporting endurance capacity. So where cold is better saved for later, heat can be integrated more directly into recovery, even in close proximity to training, without interfering with hypertrophy. Breathwork provides another hormetic lever. Practices that increase carbon dioxide tolerance, like slow, controlled breathing or breath hold, train the body to better manage stress and improve oxygen utilization. This isn't just mental. High CO tolerance correlates with greater resilience of the nervous system and more efficient energy production in the muscles. By deliberately creating short bouts of stress through controlled breathwork, you signal your body to adapt in ways that improve both recovery and performance. Importantly, this type of hormesis doesn't interfere with hypertrophy or strength signaling. Instead, it layers on top of training to expand the system's overall capacity to handle stress. The key thread here is that hormetic tools work because they challenge the system just enough to trigger adaptation, but not so much that they overwhelm it. They are stressors, but they are controlled stressors. This is why timing matters so much. Cold exposure too soon after training dampens the very signals you want to amplify. Applied later, it accelerates repair. Heat can be beneficial more immediately and also serves as a powerful way to stack adaptations beyond strength and hypertrophy. Breathwork can be applied almost anytime, but its cumulative effect on recovery and stress management makes it particularly valuable on non-training days or before sleep. What often happens is people hear about one of these tools, say ice baths, and start applying it indiscriminately. They feel less sore, so they assume it's accelerating muscle growth, when in reality, it may be interfering with it. Or they sit in the sauna occasionally without realizing that regular, deliberate heat exposure builds adaptations far beyond simple relaxation. Understanding hormesis means looking beyond the immediate sensation and thinking about the deeper signals you're sending to your body. Every stressor either amplifies or diminishes the training signal depending on context. The bigger point is that recovery isn't just passive. It's not only about lying down and waiting for the body to repair. Recovery can be trained. You can deliberately choose tools that place your body in slightly stressful states so that, when it rebounds, it comes back stronger. But that requires strategy. Just like training, recovery interventions need to be matched to your goals. If hypertrophy is your priority, save cold exposure for later. If you want broader resilience, integrate heat exposure regularly. If you want a nervous system that adapts quickly and manages stress efficiently, practice deliberate breathwork consistently. So recovery is not simply the absence of training. It's another form of training in itself, and hormetic tools are some of the most powerful ways to accelerate and deepen that process when applied with precision. There's a common belief that the harder you train, the better the results. That if you just push yourself to the edge every time you step into the gym, you'll eventually get stronger, bigger, and more resilient. But the truth is that random, unfocused effort doesn't guarantee adaptation. In fact, it often leads to plateaus, injury, or burnout. What actually produces consistent progress is training smart. That means understanding how to combine the right kinds of movements, applying progressive volume, and giving the body the recovery it needs, rather than just throwing more effort at the problem. At the core of smart training are compound lifts, movements like squats, deadlifts, bench presses, rows, pull-ups, and overhead presses. These lifts engage multiple joints and large muscle groups, and they stimulate the nervous system in a way that isolated movements never can. When you perform a squat, you're not just training your legs, you're also demanding stability from your core, coordination from your nervous system, and output from some of the largest muscles in your body. These compound lifts are the foundation for strength and hypertrophy because they maximize efficiency. You get the greatest return on effort. They also set the stage for accessory movements, which then target specific muscles or weak points to refine the overall system. Accessory movements are where intelligence in training really shows up. They're not random add-ons. They're strategically chosen to complement the compound lifts by building balance, preventing injury, and ensuring no part of the system becomes a limiting factor. For example, someone focused on deadlifts might add hamstring curls or hip thrusts to ensure posterior chain strength, or grip work to make sure the hands don't fail before the back and legs do. These accessory lifts aren't as glamorous as moving big weights, but they fill in the gaps that compound lifts can't fully address. Together, compounds and accessories create a complete program, big movements for the heavy lifting, smaller ones for stability and longevity. Progressive overload ties it all together. The body adapts only when it's asked to do more than it has done before. That doesn't mean piling on weight recklessly every week. Progression can happen through multiple variables, increasing the load, adding more total sets or reps, slowing down the eccentric phase to increase time under tension, or reducing rest to increase density. What matters is that the progression is structured, measurable, and gradual. Small, consistent increases keep the nervous system and muscles adapting without overwhelming them. Random hard work might burn more calories in the moment, but it won't create the long-term trajectory of growth and strength that progressive overload does. Rest periods are another area where smart training separates itself from reckless training. Rest isn't wasted time, it's the reset that allows you to bring quality effort to the next set. For hypertrophy, shorter rests keep metabolic stress high and sustain the growth signal. For strength, longer rests are critical to restore ATP and allow the nervous system to deliver maximal effort again. Too little rest and your performance declines. Too much rest and the stimulus fades. Matching rest to the specific adaptation you're chasing is what keeps training effective and targeted. Recovery between sessions also matters. Training smart means knowing when to push and when to pull back. It's tempting to believe that more sessions always equal more progress, but without proper recovery, the nervous system fatigues and the muscles don't repair. That's why the smartest athletes monitor their recovery through tools like sleep quality, heart rate variability, or even simple markers like grip strength or perceived energy levels. They use those metrics to guide when to increase intensity and when to focus on lighter work or active recovery. This balance keeps the system resilient long-term instead of running it into the ground. The psychological side of training smart is also important. Working hard feels satisfying. It gives you a sense of accomplishment. But working smart requires discipline. It means resisting the temptation to chase fatigue or soreness as the only markers of progress. It means sticking to a structured plan even when it feels less exciting than doing something new every session. And it means trusting that consistent, strategic effort produces results that random hard work never will. Over months and years, the difference between training hard and training smart becomes obvious. The people who chase effort without structure often burn out, get injured, or stagnate. The people who train with intention, combining compound and accessory lifts, applying progressive overload, matching rest to their goals, and prioritizing recovery, are the ones who steadily get stronger, bigger, and healthier over time. The message is simple. If you want to build muscle and strength that lasts, don't just train harder, train smarter. That's the blueprint. Train with purpose, recover with strategy, and fuel your body with the right tools. If today's video gave you clarity on how to build muscle, gain strength, or recover faster, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss new science-backed insights that can keep you progressing week after week. And share this video with someone who's chasing results but might still be missing the key ingredients. Remember, it's not just about working harder, it's about working smarter, recovering deeper, and amplifying your performance with intention. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.